Here it goes. A racetrack renowned for its finishes. The white flag already out. Allison, the leader of the race. As the field coming through the fourth turn, suddenly Ken Schrader lost control. A long slide. And then the car began to roll, taking other cars to the wall with him. The checkered flag and yellow flew together. Bobby Allison was the winner. He repeated a victory at Daytona in the Daytona 500 in February. And then, 2 weeks ago, Bobby Allison was involved in a serious accident at Pocono International Raceway. He was hospitalized. His car, number 12, sits on the grid here today. But in the cockpit is Mike Alexander, the sportsman point leader, who will drive for the injured Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison is in Lehigh Hospital. His condition this week has been upgraded from critical now to guarded, but the prognosis is still in question. His son sits on the grid and is with Jack Arute.
Davey, with all that's happened here, your thoughts before the start of this race?
Well, I'd just like to say hello to my dad, who's recuperating in the hospital in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and say hello to my mom and my grandmother and my grandfather who are up there with them, and all the family out there. That let them know we're thinking about everybody right now, but we're fixing to go out there and try to win this race, and I'll be up in Allentown in a couple of days, so y'all just hang in there.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
At the front of the field, on the pole, is Darrell Waltrip, a man who has never won here at Daytona. The cars are started. The engines all beginning to roar now. Their challenge as Darrell Waltrip and Kyle Petty on the outside of the front row begin to roll out. 42 stock cars ready to challenge one another at Daytona. Hello, I'm Paul Page, and these 42 drivers face a myriad of challenges beyond the 400 miles on the high banks of Daytona International Speedway. One of those is a restrictor plate. It's a device placed on the engine by NASCAR to reduce horsepower, reduce speed, increase safety, and make it for greater competition. Now, Johnny Rutherford, three-time Indianapolis champion, a man who won the very first NASCAR race he ever drove. They have slowed the cars down.
Well, they have, Paul. The engine builders tell us it's cost them 200 horsepower. The stopwatch tells us it's cost the cars 17 miles an hour. And anytime you slow the cars down, it puts them closer together. The driving chores in the cockpit are a lot different. You have to be very selective in the moves you make. When you pull out of line to make a pass, you've got to be sure you have the momentum to get the job done, or you could slide back in that line until you're far back in the pack and have to work your way back up, and that's quite a job.
You make the move. The decision had to be right. Now, there's a race within a race here, because at the midpoint in the NASCAR season, the Winston Cup points leader will earn an additional $150,000. That'll be awarded at the end of the race today. Now, two men are fighting that battle right now. Rusty Wallace leads the points, followed by Dale Earnhardt. They qualified with identical qualifying times. Earnhardt will start on the outside of the 9th row, and Rusty Wallace on the inside of the 10th. On board the number 90 car of Benny Parsons, you're looking over his shoulder, the 28th starting position. This camera mounted in the Don Levy Ford. We'll watch from here as well. So let's take a look at the starting lineup for the Firecracker 400 miles, 160 laps. His first pole at Daytona, Darrell Waltrip. Looking back through the field, Bonnet, Parsons, Marlin, and Shepard make up the 4th row. The interesting thing about this field, as we look at Baker and Bodine and Hillen sitting in the 5th row, is that there are a number of very big names sitting well back into the field. Richard Petty celebrates his 51st birthday here today. Patty Moise is the first woman to drive at Daytona in over 10 years. And way back at the back, because he was late for the drivers' meeting this morning, scheduled to start 18th, A.J. Foyt, but he will start 42nd. The field now moving toward turn number 3.
Yes, A.J. was late because he had been to Cleveland to qualify for an IndyCar race, and he was late getting back, didn't make the drivers' meeting, and the rule is you've got to go to the back.
42 cars are vying for a purse of $549,000. And, of course, that extra $150,000 to the points leader at the end of this race, the halfway point in the Winston Cup season. Now, the field under control of the pace car, moving off of the 4th turn. Darrell Waltrip, Kyle Petty making up the front row. Kyle Petty certainly looking for a win here in that Witt Brothers Ford. Excellent starting position. Every time they put the car on the outside of that front row, they seem to do very well at Daytona. Pace car peels off now. Starter, green flag in hand, checks the field over, looking for a green flag. Green flag flies. Waltrip lead there, and a surprising lead for this early.
Well, it is, Paul, because he did get the jump on the start, and that puts him in a very advantageous position now, because if he can get out and break the draft, then he can run by himself and hold his own.
So Waltrip comes to the backstretch. Already pulling out about a 6-car lead. The battle is for second place as Kyle Petty tries to hold off the challenge.
You can see someone there trying to find a place in line to get back in, because if you don't, you go way back to the tail end.
The key to Daytona, of course, as the field closes now down on the back of Waltrip's number 17, is the draft. If you can pull the draft, then you can win here. It is a critical factor. As now down to the inside, making his move for second place is Phil Parsons. And Parsons slides into second. As they come to the stripe, Davey Allison fell from 3rd to 9th in that first lap, and John, that is probably an example of exactly what the problem will be if you get out of the line of that draft.
Yes, it is. If you don't stay in line and stay in that freight train, you can move clear to the back, and Davey Allison just experienced that.
On the backstretch now, Darrell Waltrip, number 17, followed by the 55 car. That's Phil Parsons running in second place. Into the high bank, 31 degrees of banking at Daytona International. And back at the back of the field, one car beginning to lose an engine and a spin. Darrell Waltrip leads him to the stripe. 2 cars tangle, one of them Yarborough. Now several cars involved as we've got a melee coming off of the 4th turn. It began when one car started to have an engine go at the conclusion of the lap as he entered turn 4. Watch again the upper right-hand corner of the screen as Kulwicki spins in his own oil.
And he gathers up Cale Yarborough, has a flash fire, goes across, narrowly missing one car, slamming into the wall, but gathering up Benny Parsons. Kulwicki then careens off of the wall, slams into 2 more cars, gathering them up in a tremendous chain reaction accident.
And in Benny Parsons' car, our onboard camera rides through this accident.
Here you can see Benny pulling to the inside, waving to the cars to slow down. He sees the smoke. Suddenly, there are cars going everywhere. He gathers up Cale Yarborough. Kulwicki, he hits him very hard there, slides across, doesn't realize he's out of control yet. You can see the engine dead light on the instrument panel. He tries to pull the car back. Now he's watching to make sure no one else is going to gather him up.
And he reaches down as if he'd like to get that car started, but it does not appear that that is to be. So a major accident here on lap 2. It's a wild, wild start here at Daytona for the Firecracker today on Wide World of Sports. The 6-car chain reaction accident. Let's go down the pit area. Jackaroo.
Well, Alan Kulwicki, it was a short day for you. What happened?
Very short. We blew the engine in the Xerox Amoco Ford Thunderbird going in the 3rd turn, and I almost had it saved, but finally the oil and water got on the tires, and it spun around. A bunch of cars behind me ran into me, and it wrecked my car pretty bad and several others pretty bad, but fortunately the most important thing is it looks like nobody was hurt.
You just came out of the infield infirmary. Benny Parsons, Cale Yarborough in there. Did you get a chance to talk to them?
I didn't see Benny, but Cale's fine and Brett's fine, and I think Benny is. You know, like I said, the only good thing is that nobody got hurt.
Paul?
These 4 cars definitely out as a result of that accident when Kulwicki's engine blew coming off of 4. 2 others, the 68 car of Derek Cope and the 10 car of Ken Bouchard, are being worked on in the garage area with some hopes that they will get back into the race. So here's the top of the order. Waltrip followed by Parsons, Schrader, Shepard, and Bonnet as we're ready to come back to the green flag, again led by Darrell Waltrip.
You know, those situations happen so quickly out there, Paul. If one car gets in trouble and gathers up, as in this case, 6 cars were out of the race just on the 2nd lap.
We talked about the restrictor plate and how it inhibits power. And what about the possible effect on that in an accident like this as the green flag comes out? And it is Waltrip, followed by Parsons. Into the 1st turn, Ken Schrader in 3rd. Shepard sits in 4th place. Is it possible that some cars don't have enough power to get out of trouble?
I don't think that's the case, Paul. Everybody's dealing with the same deck out there, so it's a situation where you've got to play it, and it was just an unfortunate incident where everybody got gathered up in a chain reaction.
To the backstretch, Waltrip, the 17 car. As the top 3 put themselves together, Parsons, Schrader closes in behind Parsons now. As Phil Parsons goes high, high, begins to make a challenge on Waltrip as they come off at 3 and in through 4. Waltrip hauls her down to the low side of the corner, goes through some oil dry from the accident. No problem for the car as now Parsons begins to forge ahead. He has a nose on Waltrip coming to the line, and then Waltrip going into turn 1, pushes back into the lead. Now they're side by side.
Bill Parsons has been having an excellent year. He won a race at Talladega, so he is primed and ready. And, of course, running on the outside like that, Darrell has a car that works extremely well around the bottom of this racetrack. So Phil is going the long way around and doing it the tough way. If he takes the lead, he will have earned it.
So the battle at the front of the pack of 7 cars up at the front of the field. But it is Parsons and Waltrip that fight. Bodine now comes and sticks his nose into 3rd place at the moment. Schrader pushed to the high side. Bill Parsons in 2nd place now. The fight for 3rd at the moment, but really a fight for the top 7 places. As once again, it is Parsons that is able to put a nose just ahead of Waltrip at the line, but then the momentum carries Waltrip ahead in the 1st turn. Earnhardt, part of that points fight for the $150,000, passed 5 cars as the green came out and is now running in 12th place as the fight continues at the front of the field. And Waltrip is able to use that low side of the track, and that gives him the run going into 1 and 2, but then Parsons takes over coming into 3 and 4.
It really does, but you see the car moving to the left there. Parsons is now starting to show some gain. He's pulled out, and the reason for that is that Waltrip is running side by side back there. Now you see him start to fade back a little bit. The cars stay in line. They run much faster, Paul. When you get side by side, then they start dragging down, and you can see Parsons starting to inch ahead and get a little bit of daylight.
And Darrell Waltrip drops back as now Phil Parsons leads at the Firecracker 400, followed by Ken Schrader. We'll be back with more after this. Back at Daytona, the Firecracker 400, where Phil Parsons leads it. There are 5 cars strung together at the front of the field. Parsons followed by Ken Schrader, Morgan Shepherd, Sterling Marlin, and Darrell Waltrip. Waltrip started on the pole, but he has dropped back into 5th place. For Phil Parsons, his 2 best NASCAR finishes were a win at Talladega and a 3rd place here in the Daytona 500 back in February. Let's go to the pits now and Jerry Punch.
Well, Paul, possibly an early problem for Richard Petty. The King came through that crash a few minutes ago up in turn 4 and got a cracked windshield. Some debris flying has cracked the windshield. That's not the serious problem. His crew chief in Cousindale Inman said they may have an oil leak. Now, NASCAR has been watching that car very closely. The car pitted. They had a puddle of oil beneath the car, so they're watching it, hoping it maybe it was a small leak and they may have fixed it. But keep an eye on the King, Richard Petty.
Petty, car number 43. Celebrates his 51st birthday today, and he said he hopes the second 50 years is better than the first, Johnny Rutherford. There is Richard Petty.
Yes, Richard Petty, the king of this racetrack and of NASCAR. He does a creditable job anywhere he goes, and 51's not that old.
And while we watch Richard Petty, we should perhaps mention that Kyle Petty, who started on the outside of the front row, has now dropped back to 10th place. The report is that he's dropped a cylinder and the car is only running on 7. Now again, if we follow the restrictor plate situation, if you have that problem happen, you're losing even more power, substantially more power, John.
Yes, it makes the engine more critical because you're dealing with 200 less if you didn't have the, if you didn't have the restrictor plate, you'd have 200 more horsepower. So obviously when you take away any more than that, you have really got a problem.
No change at the front of the field. Phil Parsons followed by Schrader, then Morgan Shepherd, Marlin, and Darrell Waltrip all running together. And these 5 have been smart enough to drop into line and use the aerodynamic advantage of one another. They're actually pulling each other along.
Yes, it's like one car or you got 6 engines, 5 engines there in one car because they're all staying together, sharing the same air, so to speak. But you can see the other cars in the second group, they're kind of all side by side, and that slows you down.
We've talked about this restrictor plate. It is one of the rule changes that NASCAR instituted over the winter to slow the cars down and make them safer. There were other considerations as well. So Jack Arute takes a look at the NASCAR changes.
The first first modification is recessing the passenger side window. Now, the second is adding 2 wind splitters across the roof of the race car. Now, according to NASCAR officials, that will account for a 52% reduction in the lift when a car is sideways. But still, the major concern for teams and drivers is this, the carburetor restrictor plate. Now, how does a restrictor plate work? Well, imagine, if you will, that this is a cylinder in a race car engine. Now, combustion takes place when you have a mixture of fuel and air. When it burns unrestricted, it burns quite nicely and creates an awful lot of horsepower. But when you have a mixture of fuel and a reduction in air through the carburetor restrictor plate, it does not burn anywhere near as well. So when you have a reduction in combustion, you therefore have a reduction in horsepower, and that should slow the cars down here at Daytona.
And several cars did get sideways during that lap 2 accident, so maybe that aerodynamic idea has now been tested in reality, and hopefully it works. Phil Parsons out in front of this field, and he's running laps at 190.4 miles an hour. In second place is Ken Schrader, followed by Shepard, Marlin, and Waltrip. And they run tightly together, and these 5 cars are beginning to run away from the 6th place car, which at the moment is Dale Earnhardt. The interval from 5th back to 6th is 3.1 seconds. We'll be back with more from Daytona after this. 55 Oldsmobile of Phil Parsons started 6th, runs in the lead. Darrell Waltrip has moved up to the front and tried to challenge, and now has dropped back into 4th place once again. In 2nd place, Sterling Marlin, Morgan Shepard runs in 3rd. So the front of the order remains about the same, but the leaders are now beginning to encounter some back marker traffic. And with that encounter, Dale Earnhardt is moving forward. Earnhardt started 20th. He is now running 5th and is trying to catch up with the 5 cars that are running in the lead pack. Now, Phil Parsons won at Talladega. We asked him, how much of a change has there been now? What effect has there been since you have moved to the victory circle?
Well, I haven't been home much. It's been pretty hectic, but I got home a couple days after the race, and my wife said, "You want me to answer the phone for you?" And I said, "I've been waiting 25 years for this phone to ring. I want to talk to everybody who wants to call." But no, it's been really great.
And now Dale Earnhardt has moved up into 4th place. So Earnhardt, a key figure in that points battle, started 20th, has moved to 4th. Rusty Wallace, who started 19th, is now running in 15th place.
It's clear that Dale Earnhardt has a strong race car today, as he always usually does at this place. He's moving quite well. I'm surprised Rusty Wallace hasn't made more of a move, but he's been caught back in a slower pack.
Earnhardt sitting back on the bumper of the 33 car of Morgan Shepard, and now running in 4th place. Just ahead is Marlin, and of course at the front of the pack is Bill Parsons. Bill Elliott's number 9 car, who started 34th, has also made his moves, and he is up and now running in 13th place. But the most spectacular move comes from the number 3 car of Dale Earnhardt, now running in 4th.
Well, we've seen this lead group of 5 cars pull away from the pack, and then suddenly everyone in the back lines up, gets together, and catches them again. So it's quite a race.
And exactly what you suggested at the start of this race, John. You have to be very careful where you make your move. Now Marlin moves around Parsons and is able to move there without any problem at all. We'll be back with more from Daytona right after this. Marlin's still the leader in 44, but now the challenge comes from Earnhardt, as Earnhardt in that black number 3 moves down on the inside. Marlin to the high side, and Earnhardt simply blows him away, and now Earnhardt moves into the lead of the Firecracker. We'll be back for more of the Firecracker later, but now to Al Trautwig in Oslo.
Actually, Jackie, something broke in the motor.
So now you're off to Cleveland, double duty this weekend.
Right, we're off there in just a little while.
He said he broke a cylinder. He's going to back this car up, and then he's getting on his Learjet, and he's going off to Cleveland to run in the kart race tomorrow. Gentlemen? I hear you.